Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending. We're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to start with item number 1, which is call to order and to establish a quorum. So if Ms. Linden could go ahead and do a roll call, please.
Okay, good morning. Member Hancock?
Present.
Dr. Kawaguchi?
Present.
Member Linden, present. Member Moridomi?
Present.
Dr. Pruitt? Dr. Pruitt?
Here.
Okay.
Present.
Dr. Ross? Dr. Ross?
He's not here today.
Okay.
No, was he here?
No.
Oh, no.
Okay. Member Sims?
Present.
Dr. Garcia?
Present.
And Dr. Wong?
Present. All right, so
Okay, so we have a quorum.
we have a quorum. Fantastic. Thank you. Let's go ahead and move on to item number 2, which is public comment for items not on the agenda. Does anyone that's in the hearing room have anything that they would like to add? Is there anyone in the public that would like to add anything to our upcoming agenda? And Madam Moderator, if you could open up the queue to see if anyone else in the public has anything to add to the agenda.
This is a moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment for items not on the agenda, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. I'll pause a moment to allow the public time to access these features and submit their requests. All right, and seeing none, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. All right, let's go ahead and go on to item number 3, which is an update from the Department of Consumer Affairs. And you have green on. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone. So I will go ahead and get started with the update. And so starting off with the DCA Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Steering Committee. At the end of January, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Steering Committee met and decided to focus on training for its first quarter of 2023. And so over the next few months, all staff, including DCA's solid trainers and board and bureau leadership, will be receiving DEI training and regular and recurring training opportunities as well. On March 3rd, DCA's Solid Planning and Training Unit led a full day of training for the committee, and the training included 4 training modules, which were number 1, understanding the value of DEI in the workplace. Number 2, learning to navigate diverse conversations. Number 3, decoding our unconscious biases. And number 4, unleashing the power of generational differences. And so on March 21st, as part of the Director's Quarterly, executive officers and board and bureau chiefs will attend a 1.5-hour DEI leadership training to gain a general understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion and what it means as a leader and regulator with DCA. And lastly, in late April, the Solid trainers will be DEI certified and will offer DEI-related trainings to all DCA employees by June. And so the DEI committee will be meeting again on May 12th, and we will have further updates after that meeting. In terms of our strategic planning, DCA's Solid team is in the final stages of updating its strategic planning process, which includes an equity analysis. Environmental scan surveys and SWOT analysis will include DEI-related questions to assist boards and bureaus in developing DEI-related goals and objectives as part of their strategic plans. To further assist the boards and bureaus, sample DEI objectives will be provided. a training video, as well as a video message from Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency Secretary Lourdes Castro Ramirez and DCA Director Kimberly Kirkmeyer are in the works to explain their perspectives on DEI and how it relates to the board's roles as regulators and policymakers. To improve public access, DCA is creating a centralized website page on DCA's website, dca.ca.gov, that will house all board and bureau strategic plans. Once these new DEI components have been finalized, Solid will begin working with DCA's board and bureaus to develop new strategic plans, or existing ones will be updated. And as new information becomes available, we will keep your executive officer informed. And so revisiting a board member training reminders. So just a reminder that board members must submit your certificates of completion to your executive officer and DCA at memberrelations@dca.ca.gov. And so there are 2 DCA-wide mandatory trainings for 2023, and this includes sexual harassment prevention training and information security awareness. All DCA employees and appointees, including board members, will need to complete the sexual harassment prevention training this year. This year's training is required every odd-numbered year and is online, self-paced, in approximately 2 hours. In addition, if you are assigned a DCA email, which ends at dca.ca.gov, you are required to complete the Information Security Awareness Fundamentals 2023 training. Information security awareness trainings address everyone's role in participating and protecting with DCA data and information. The training is online and required every year. Both sexual harassment prevention training and information security awareness trainings are available in the department's learning management system, which is commonly referred to as LMS. Both trainings can be accessed online at any time, and in the next few weeks, board members will receive further information via email on how to access these trainings. Board members must complete board member orientation, or BMOT, within the first year of appointment or reappointment, ethics training within 6 months of appointment and every 2 years thereafter, and defensive driver training within the first year and every 4 years. For your convenience, these trainings are offered multiple times a year and in a variety of formats. For more information, a mandatory trainings page has been created to help members identify, access, and track specified trainings. The page includes direct links to mandatory trainings, as well as pertinent information and policies specific to these training courses. You can go to dca.ca.gov and click on the DCA Board Members Resource Center page for all the required board member trainings. And for anyone that's having issues with your LMS account, I am happy to assist with any troubleshooting or resetting passwords. So feel free to either reach out to your executive officer to contact me, Yvonne Durantes, or you can reach out to me directly. And so looking ahead in terms of filing your annual Form 700 by March 15th of 2023, which has now passed, board members and committee members are required to file a statement of economic interest within 30 days of appointment annually and within 30 days of leaving office. And so this year's annual filing period covers the prior calendar year, which it runs January 1st through December 31st of 2022. And so the official deadline for filing is Friday, April 1st. But to ensure compliance, DCA does request that Form 700 filers complete the e-filing by March 15th. So if you haven't done so already, please do so as soon as possible. And you should have received an email from NetFile with instructions. But if you haven't, please reach out to melissa.gear@dca.ca.gov. And so next week is our first board member orientation training of the year. It will be held on March 22nd. And as previously mentioned, board members must complete BMOT within 1 year of appointment or reappointment. And so on March 22nd, BMOT will be held completely virtual, and it will be a live day of training. And so it will possibly be held in person on June 20th of 2023. And October 10th of 2023. So these are the 2 additional dates other than the one happening next week. And so there is still time to register if you haven't done so already and are interested. And so that can also be done via LMS. Virtual meetings and Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act. So legislation passed last year which amended provisions of the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act to extend the ability of state bodies such as DCA's board and bureaus to conduct public meetings virtually through July 1st of 2023. Under current provisions, no physical meeting location is necessary. Board members' virtual locations do not need to be open to the public, and members of the public can participate virtually or telephonically, increasing accessibility. Absent legislation to extend these provisions, DCA's boards and bureaus will not be allowed to conduct meetings virtually. After July 1st, boards will have to return to the Open Meeting Act teleconference meeting requirements they were accustomed to before COVID-19. In case you missed it, Board and Bureau Relations circulated a winter board member newsletter at the end of January, and so this issue contains introductions on the new BBR team, helpful resources, training information, and department updates. So if you would like to access the newsletter, please visit dca.ca.gov. Lastly, I would like to let the members know that DCA has begun its Enlighten enforcement process. And so you may remember that last year, the Enlighten licensing process project team released its report, including recommendations on how to improve the licensing process, specifically for the Board of Registered Nursing. But there were many recommendations that other boards could implement as well to improve their processes. And so starting in March, the team is now moving to enforcement, and the Dental Board of California has agreed to be the first board to go through the process. And so on March 2nd, the co-chairs of the project led staff through a review of their complaint and investigation process, as subject matter experts from all the boards were able to ask questions and provide suggestions. And so this review process will continue until all aspects of the enforcement process have been reviewed. And so the end result will be another report with recommendations, a sample enforcement policies, and procedures manual. And lastly, a critical review of the process that will be used to update DCA's Enforcement Academy training. And so this process will also assist in identifying the codes used for reporting to ensure all boards and bureaus are reporting their data accurately. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I always am available via email to help, like I said, with troubleshooting anything with LMS or answer any questions about training requirements or DEI updates. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yvonne, just a question again on the BMOT dates for June and October. Could you say those dates again?
Yeah, so it's June 20th and then October 10th. And so it's not determined yet whether they'll be virtual or hybrid, you know, so for sure next week's will be the you know, completely virtual. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Let's go. Thank you very much. Let's go ahead and go on to item 3B, which is an update from the budget office.
Good morning. How are you? Just making sure my mic and camera are on for you.
We can see and hear you perfectly.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Good morning. My name is Veronica Hernandez, and I am a budget analyst with the DCA Budget Office. I want to thank the board and executive staff for allowing me a few minutes to present the board's expenditure projections and the fund condition statement, as well as answer any questions you may have. I want to begin with sharing that on January 10th, 2023, the governor's budget was released, which provided updated budget numbers for the board that include incremental adjustments to the current year, which is 2022-23, as well as the budget year 23-24. These incremental changes resulted in an increase in the board's current year appropriation by approximately $100,000 since the last time I presented to the board back in December. I want to now draw your attention to agenda item 3BI. These are two documents. The first page is the fund condition statement, and the second page is the expenditure projections. These are the documents I'll be discussing today. They provide a lot of information on the board's budget. I'd like to highlight some of that and provide a little bit more clarity. First, I'm going to start with the expenditure projections, which is actually the second document. Perfect, thank you. Expenditures are based on actual data through fiscal month 7, which is January 2023, as well as projections through the remaining fiscal year. When reviewing this report, the top portion is the board's personnel services, followed by the board's operating expenses. As we move to the end of the document, you'll see that the board had a beginning base budget, of just over 3.9 million. Year to date, the board has expended approximately 1.7 million and is projected to spend a total of just over 2.86 million, creating a reversion to the board's fund of just over 1 million, which is 27.68%. The next document now, sorry if we can go back to page 1, is the fund condition statement. As a reminder, we read this document from top to bottom and left to right. I'll go a little further into detail on this document. The left column is the board's prior year actuals, which is 2021-22. The board ended 21-22 with just over $2 million reserve balance, which is 7.9 months in reserve. Months in reserve is the amount of time the board can continue normal operations without any incoming revenues. For the current year, which again is based on fiscal month 7, the board is projected to bring in approximately 2.5 million in revenue and expend just over 3 million between authorized expenditures and direct draws to the fund, leaving the board with a fund balance of 2.6 million, which is 7.4 months in reserve. In budget year revenue, budget year revenue is projected to come in just under 3 million, which is at 2.87 million. Expenditures are projected at full appropriation, reducing the fund reserve balance to 3.4 months by the end of 23-24. The board will most likely realize savings in their appropriation with personnel services. Should the board revert even half of that, of what is projected in the current year, next fiscal year, the fund reserve balance will increase by about 3 months in the budget year. The budget office will continue to monitor the board's revenue and expenditures and report back to the board with monthly projections as we continue to close fiscal months in the current fiscal year. Just a few things to note on the fund condition is a snapshot in time. One of the main factors driving expenditure increases is in future years as a result of personnel services adjustments, which includes general salary increases, as well as employee compensation and retirement rate adjustments. The budget office includes an ongoing 3% increase to expenditures on the fund condition statement to account for these ongoing incremental adjustments. Funds will traditionally show a slight decline for months in reserve due to the conservative projection method displayed in the fund condition, which are expenditures projected with an ongoing 3% increase. And lastly, we would like to note that the board that any future legislation or unanticipated events could result in the board's need for additional resources, which would increase pressures to the fund. Budget office will continue to monitor the board's fund condition statement and keep the line of communication with the executive staff open for any future needs or expectations. Again, I'd like to thank the board and the executive staff for inviting me to today's meeting, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I think Mr. Morodomi has a question. Mark, you want to go ahead?
Hi, thanks.
Hi. Yes, thank you.
Thank you for that presentation.
Of course.
This is a question to you and later for our own board staff. As a board member, I'm going to rely upon your expertise and your professional competence and ask you, what should this board be doing right now to address the future imbalance that is projected?
Yes. We are in discussion of we're in discussion with the executive staff, possibly for some fee increases, which I know that will definitely help. I think that that's going to be discussed a little bit later in the meeting by the executive officer. So I think that would be the biggest thing that would help with revenue.
Anything else we should be doing right now?
Mark, this is Greg Pruden, Interim Executive Officer for the board. One of the things that staff is currently engaged on as it relates to examining our fund condition and our costs as well as revenues is working with the budget office to examine opportunities for efficiencies because the answer to this situation can't just involve increasing fees. So as part of that, and I think this kind of starts to bleed into, I think, item 2 or the subsequent item here on the agenda. But it's examining what the current revenue is as well as what the projected expenditures are. And one can see that we are structurally imbalanced. We're bringing in less revenue than we are expending. And so one of the drivers there, the main driver there is our personnel costs and expenditures. I could talk in more detail. I think it's probably more appropriate in the subsequent item here, but to answer your question sort of high level at the current moment, what can we be doing right now? Continuing to find the savings on the personnel side, and the main tool that we have to do that is by holding vacant positions open.
Thank you, Greg. I guess let me clarify my question. And I don't want to bleed into that report that you produced on the next item. Thank you very much for that report, by the way. I guess my question is more specific. When I say board, I mean those of us here on the virtual dais. What should the board members be doing right now to address the projected deficit? Other than relying upon staff and considering the fee increases and anything else, are there anything else we should be scheduling, moving upon to move things along?
Member Moridomi, I think this again kind of points us to the subsequent agenda item where I can more effectively, I think, answer your question. I don't think I can effectively answer that question on this agenda item, but when we get to the next one, I can more affirmatively tell you what I think we can do right now.
Great, that's fantastic. And budget officer, is there anything that the board members should be doing right now other than considering what our board staff is going to be presenting?
I would definitely agree. There's, like I said, there's going to be discussion on increasing fees, definitely lowering cost, and just keeping the line of communication open with the board members and the EO.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, this is Member Linden. I have a question as well. We have a structural imbalance. It looks like the bulk of that is due to a big increase in personnel. And I think what's hard for me to understand is, because we had a very healthy reserve in terms of, how many months we have in reserve. A lot of that seems to be based on that one-time transfer from the RDO fund to our fund. But I think it's still confusing for me to understand how we ended up with the structural imbalance. We did get a big increase in funds but that was a one-time thing. And I know since then we've had BCPs approved, which increases overall personnel expenses. But I guess I'm curious, how did those BCPs get approved without, that healthy reserve budget, that was based on the actual budget and not based on like a one-time transfer? So I'm having a hard time understanding how we really got to this position in the first place. I understand that there are imbalances and, obviously the reserve will go down, but I guess I don't understand how we got all those positions approved if we didn't have the money to pay for them as, with the existing revenue we have. Thanks.
Member Linden, I can address the question from one angle. So one of the BCPs that the board submitted and was approved for related to the mobile optometric office program, which was a legislative-driven item. And I believe through that BCP, we received 2 positions. And the mobile optometric office program is a program that is not implemented as we sit here today. And so part of the reason why we have the fund conditions that we have, this is one example, the mobile optometric office program, because it is not implemented, is not bringing in any revenue to the fund. Yet the BCP provided us positions. So we have increased our expenditure costs, but we have not implemented the program to bring revenue in to help pay for those specific positions. So that's one example. I believe at the August meeting, the budget office provided information regarding an overestimation on the revenue side. So that also partially explains the structural deficit issues that the fund has. And on that specific item, the over projected revenue had to deal with the optician program. So those 2 examples combined contribute a significant but not a majority to the structural imbalance. So that's one, if not 2 examples to help explain why we have a structural imbalance.
Thank you.
So my question / maybe it's more of a comment, Veronica, is not aimed at you. When we look back on history, we have been presented variable budget reports where it seems like with every new assignment we have of somebody responsible for looking at our budget and showing us a sheet like this, that it seems to vary. So how would you suggest the board ensure that we have a deeper understanding of our budget so we are less reliant on the changes of personnel from DCA?
I would definitely say keeping that line of communication open with the EO, definitely. Like I said, I do present these projections to the executive staff every month. Every fiscal month, I give them a new projection. I'm not sure if that is passed on to the board members or not. But we can also definitely provide, the budget office can provide additional training to board members if need be on these projections and how to read the documents. But they're definitely provided every month.
Member Kawaguchi, and I think for all the members and members of the public, I think we're starting to kind of, again, bleed into the subsequent item where I think I can provide and explain a little bit more on some of the questions that are being asked. I'm not at all trying to sort of rush us along or close out this item. But I would just mention that, and then I guess to address the comment that was, and question that was just made, and to follow up from what Veronica just said, yes, we do receive monthly revenue and expenditure reports from the budget office. I take a very close and careful look at those items, and I meet monthly with the budget office, including Veronica and her manager, to discuss those monthly reports and projections. So we'd be happy to start bringing those to the board if that would be the board's prerogative. But that is another sort of angle to this issue, which is we are actively examining and analyzing those monthly revenue and expenditure reports.
Do any other members that are remote have any other comments? Otherwise, I would ask Madam Moderator if you could open up the Q&A for public comment.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. And I'll pause a moment to allow the public time to access these features and submit their requests. All right, and seeing no requests for public comment, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. And I think I skipped if there was any public comment from the public in the hearing room. Looks like there's no public comment in the hearing room either. Thank you. So thank you, Veronica, for giving us such a thorough update.
Yes, thank you so much.
Let's go on to item number 4, which is the board president's report. So that's
3B-II.
Oh, I'm skipping things, apparently. 3B-II, discussion and possible action regarding future fund condition issues.
Thank you, President Wong and members. Gregory Pruden is Interim Executive Officer. I'm going to be presenting this item to you all. In your meeting materials is a memo, agenda item 3BI, budget update, discussion and possible action regarding future fund condition issues that we put together for today's meeting. And just by way of brief background, the memo covers a little bit of historical information to kind of get us caught up, but to catch members of the public and the board up to speed on this item. At the August 22 meeting, August meeting of last year, we had a pretty robust and detailed discussion on our fund condition from the budget office. At that time, the board's structural imbalance was projected to be approximately $1 million, specifically $964,000. That was the projected structural deficit from August of last year carrying forward to the end of the current fiscal year, which ends June 30 of this year. At the December board meeting, updated documents were presented which shown that structural deficit had come down slightly and was now projected to be at around $850,000. At today's meeting, and what we just were presented on by the budget office, shows that we're going to spend, projected to spend slightly over $3 million this year, ending June 30th, but we are only projected to bring in $2.5 million in revenue. So that would leave us with a realized structural deficit of around $544,000. As was discussed at the August and December board meetings, the main contributing factor to these costs increasing over time are the BCPs and and the additional positions that the board received from those BCPs that added to our organizational chart. We have not received any new revenues to pay for these additional positions. And as was mentioned a few moments ago, one of the BCPs was related to the mobile optometric office program, which as of today is not currently implemented. Thus, the board has not received any revenue for that program. When we add a position to our org chart, whether the position is filled or not, we incur pro rata costs that we have to expend for those positions. So over the last year or so, the board has carried a fairly high vacancy rate of around 1/3. And it is this vacancy rate that is the main factor contributing to bringing our projected deficit down from around 1 million to around 500,000. Not filling those positions realizes salary savings that improves our fund condition. However, we still incur pro rata dollars and costs for those positions. So not every dollar is actually saved. We spent a little bit of time talking about the personnel costs, and I just want to kind of highlight that again here. In the memo for 3BI, we have information showing that our personnel expenditure costs over the last 2 fiscal years has increased by around $600,000. That is partially explained by the increase in positions, but it is also explained by an increase in salaries and benefits. And again, adding more positions to our org chart increase our pro rata costs. So the board is spending around $150,000 more this fiscal year in DCA pro rata costs than we did in the previous fiscal year. All of this is to say that the board does need to pursue corrective action to address its fund condition issues. However, I recognize that the answer to this problem should not and cannot be solely to increase license fees. We also need to explain what we are doing to control costs on the expenditure side. So as was just mentioned, the main tool we have to control costs is to achieve salary savings, and the way we achieve that is by holding positions vacant. We have to be very mindful about doing that so that we don't jeopardize our mandates and our operations, but that is, again, the main tool that we have to achieve salary savings. What are some other things that we are currently doing to control costs and do our work more efficiently and more effectively? Well, we're currently reviewing our organizational chart for areas where perhaps we have vacant positions that we don't actually need. And could ultimately fall off into the future. So that's an ongoing area that we are currently examining. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this at a future item, but I think it's relevant to discuss now. The board has recently engaged at a staff level with the department's organizational improvement office on a project, again, which we'll discuss a little bit later in today's meeting. But that project is really aimed at examining our current processes and looking at ways to do our work more efficiently and effectively. So we're hopeful that we'll bear fruit there. Another item that we're working on, and was mentioned by Yvonne on the DCA update, is the Enlightened Enforcement Project. We have been sending staff to those meetings to cross-train and to learn how others are doing their work here at DCA. We are also actively examining and questioning our processes with the BREEZE team and looking to implement additional technology solutions to do our work more efficiently and effectively there. An example of that would be that the board currently has license applications which are still paper-based and not on BREEZE and online. So those are several examples of areas that we're currently engaged on to examine our processes, to attempt to control costs and to do work more efficiently. However, if we were to eliminate all of the vacant positions that we have on our org chart today, we would still have a structural deficit. We would still have a fund condition problem. So we cannot cut our way out of this problem. We have to grow revenue. And so at a prior meeting, I believe it was the December meeting, member Yu, who's not with us, had asked for staff to come back with a fee chart. And we've included that fee chart here in item 3BII to show the board and members of the public what our current fees are, what the current statutory cap of all of our fees are, and then concluding from there which fees we have room presently to increase via regulation. And so that's my presentation for the board and members of the public on item 3BI. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So I'm a little confused on the numbers between what you're discussing, which sounds updated, versus our fund condition projections, because our fund projection that document that we have a shortfall of approximately 1.5, it looks like, over the future years, 1.5 million. So you're saying to me that this is not updated, correct?
So I'm not sure if Veronica and budgets are still on to possibly correct me here. My understanding is, Member Taguchi, you're looking at the budget year, you're looking at the projection of a 2.8 million in revenue in budget year 23-24 and a 4.2 million expenditure in that year. Is that correct?
No, I'm looking at one line lower, fund balance.
You're looking at the fund balance, okay. So the expenditure number you see for this current year, which shows slightly over 3 million, that is the current projected expenditure through the end of this fiscal year. The 4.2 million expenditure in the budget year 23-24 would be if we fully expended our appropriated expenditures. We historically do not. We revert. So if you recall, in the August meeting, our initial structural deficit was projected to be around $1 million. Because we've been achieving salary savings, our projected expenditures to the year end have come down, right, reducing that structural deficit. So that scenario would be likely to occur next year as well, assuming we maintain our salary savings and don't fill all of our positions. That would be our actual expenditures. But projected expenditures assume that we fully expend. I don't know, Veronica, or if Karen from Budgets is on as well, if I got any of that wrong, or if you wanted to chime in.
Hi, this is Karen Munoz. I'm one of the budget managers. And I can also add a little bit. What Greg said is correct. In what you're seeing on that document for budget year is assuming full appropriation is spent and revenue is realized. It doesn't account for any updates or adjustments to your revenue in budget year, and it doesn't account for any savings in budget year for expenditures. You're also seeing a 3% increase in out years within your expenditures to account for any general salary increases, any rate increases within our retirement or employee comp. So we include that on your fund condition to show those potential increases and to spend to full appropriation. But historically, and I believe Veronica pointed out in her presentation, if the board does revert even half of what they're reverting in the current year, projecting, so if they revert approximately $500,000 in budget year, it would increase your months in reserve by a couple months. So it's showing, I would say, worst case scenario as what we're seeing now, but any reversions to your fund will push the needle out a little bit more. But it is kicking the can down the road per se, because if the expenditures exceed revenues, which they would, even if you did have that reversion, as they are exceeding in current year, there is still a need in out years for to look at your fees.
Okay, my follow-up question, Greg, is for many years, we as a board received feedback when there were issues with the timely execution of our responsibilities as a board, that there were staffing shortfalls. Mm-hmm. Hence the budget change proposals, hence their approvals. So it makes me a little nervous that we may have to consider giving up positions that we may or may not need. Now, I understand the productivity training and efficiencies, all those things, but there's a delicate balance, obviously, with that. And so I think we need to see more numbers about how things would look and how it's going to balance, and reality of what that's going to mean for the processing of the responsibilities we have as a board. Because we've had this discussion in the past where we've tried to look at efficiencies, and efficiencies historically have not taken us very far. So, you know, it was so hard to fight for those budget change proposals. It just makes me a little nervous to have to consider giving them up and consider giving up positions.
Member Taguchi, appreciate the comment. We can bring back more information at a future meeting. I can address, perhaps give you one example of to what you're speaking toward. SB 509 was a recent bill from a couple years ago that had to do with COVID temporary licensure. This board submitted a BCP that it was approved for, which gave it a half position at the AGPA level and $75,000 in expenditure authority. We have, I believe, received one application for that type. So we don't have the workload to justify that position. Yet it's on our org chart, increased our expenditure authority, and increased our pro rata dollars. So that's a specific example of a BCP in a position that we got that we probably don't need today. But we can keep examining those specifics on the work chart and bring back future numbers if you'd like.
Okay, I have one more comment, and that is I cannot recollect the last time that licensing fees for optometrists were raised. Personally, I just can't remember the last time it was raised. It's been at that level for many years. So I know that we'll be discussing that, but I think it's probably going to be appropriate.
Well, as part of this.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, Mark. Before we go ahead and talk about licensing fees, I think Mark had his hand raised earlier. Mark?
Hi, just two comments. One comment is about salary savings, and I get that the methodology, but this is regarding the filling of the positions for the mobile optometric clinics. I hope we don't get into a situation where I've seen in my past work with cities where cities have a budget deficit, so they don't fill the position of tax collectors and for salary savings, but as a result, they don't collect taxes, so they don't have the revenue. So I think, and also given the legislative interest of the mobile optometric clinics, I really hope we can find a way to hire those people to bring in the revenue, right? Second, I offer this to staff. I wonder if there are any enforcement costs that can be saved. You know, when we have a budget crunch, we have to set our priorities in all areas, including enforcement. And if there are lower level violations that we that have less public harm, and we want to engage resources into areas where there's more public harm, those areas that have less public harm or no public harm may have to be enforced less. I give the executive, the officer, the discretion to figure out what those areas are. But again, public harm is a priority. If you need guidance from the board, I'm sure that can be discussed at the board level. But prioritizing enforcement cases and closing cases where there's no very little public harm could save enforcement costs.
Thanks, Mark. Now, Greg, if you wanted to talk about changes in fees, would be great.
Yeah, so again, as part of item 3B we've included a fee chart for all to see what our current fees are, as well as what the present statutory caps of those fees are. as Member Kawaguchi pointed out, one of the fees that is on here that is not presently at its cap is on the optometry side, and that is the biennial license renewal. That fee is currently at $425, and the statutory cap is $500. So that means the board has authority to pursue an increase above $425 up to $500. Other fees on the optometry side that are not presently at their cap include glaucoma certification, the lacrimal irrigation and dilation certification, and the continuing education course approvals. From there, the fees pertaining to our board that are not at cap, that could be raised to cap via regulation, are on the optician side. And those are all of the application fees for those license types, as well as the initial registration or initial license for those fee types. So that would be moving from $150 at the present fee for the applications to a possible upward cap of $200, and then the initial license and registration fees are presently at $200 and could be raised up to $300. Staff would appreciate direction from the board to bring back at a future meeting, including possibly the next meeting, which is May, regulatory language to adjust these fees to their current caps.
Does anyone have any comments or questions? Oh, we have a hand raised in, we can go ahead and take public comment. We have public comment in the hearing room. If you want to come forward.
There should be a button. There should be a little button on the side of the mic that you can hit, and then we'll.
Good morning, everyone. Hi, my name's Steve Keller. My license number is 10085, and I'm here for some other things. But I have a question about raising the fees. Absolutely no objection to that. But what I would like to know is, if all those fees were raised to their caps, by how much would that reduce the deficit?
Yeah, am I allowed to answer? Okay. Appreciate the question, thank you. So present estimate, if we raised all of these fees to their caps, would bring in somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000 in revenue. That would almost eliminate the present structural deficit. You know, hard to know exactly what future revenue, how it will come in. So certainly can't guarantee, right, or promise what the future will look like should these fees be increased in terms of what that actual revenue would come in at. We would need to be very judicious working with the budget office and tracking the revenue chart that comes in monthly. As part of this issue, it's not just the increase in cost and expenditures problem. The board has over-projected revenue in the past. So again, part of that is not implementing the mobile optometric program. Part of that was revenue on the optician side came in lower than what we anticipated. So we would need, again, to be very careful about examining the revenue that is coming in under any new fees. But it is possible that raising all of these fees to the present cap could bring in around $500,000, which would be helpful for the present structural deficit. Might not set us on a good glide path for years out in the future, but would help for the near term.
So as we evaluate this, one thing that we need to look at is the recent past related to CLD, SLD fees. We did a fairly healthy increase not very long ago. So for us to look at that again so soon, I'm not sure we can justify. So I'm not sure we're going to be able to increase everything to its statutory cap. So that'll be something I think we'll have to have continued conversation about.
Member Taguchi, appreciate the comment there in the historical context. What we have in front today is the ability to have a motion to direct staff to come back at a future meeting to propose to increase these fees. This would be a regulatory requirement, so any board proposal would still have to go through the formal rulemaking process, where there'd be ample time for public comment and additional items and materials. But what we're hoping to achieve today is direction from the board for the staff to come back at a future meeting to begin the process. From there, the languages would need to be board approved, and then would need to direct staff to initiate the rulemaking process. So we're still a bit away, if you will, from that more formal rulemaking side of the equation. But we would like to get the ball rolling, if you will, on bringing to the board regulatory language that would increase the fees.
Okay. I have a question, Greg. If we wanted to increase other fees for optometry, is that a different process, or what process would that be?
You're referring to the fees that are presently at cap? For all fees that are presently at cap, the board has no ability to adjust those fees upward, precisely because they're at cap. So that process would require a formal fee study, which would, the results of that fee study would be pointing to future statutory legislative changes to raise fees that are presently at cap. So that would be a future and separate item.
I was going to propose a motion. If there's no other comments.
I think you need to take public comment. We took it in the room. We didn't take it.
Yeah. All right. Does anybody else who's remote have any other comments? Then, Madam Moderator, Mark, are you raising your hand? No. Okay. Sorry.
This is the moderator, and
He's adjusting his pen. If you could open up the Q&A, please, for public comment.
this is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public on WebEx, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And audio-only participants can raise their hand by pressing *3 on their device. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access these features and submit their requests. All right, and seeing none, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. And we've already had public comment in the meeting room. Does anyone else have any comments? No? Oh. Turn off the mic, please. All right, so we have no more public comment. Would anyone like to make a motion to propose to increase the fees?
Yeah, I would like to, this is Member Garcia, I'd like to make a motion to direct staff to bring to the May 2023 board meeting proposed regulatory language to increase those fees currently not at their statutory cap to their statutory caps.
And can I get a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so I have a motion from Dr. Garcia and a second from Mr. Mordomi. And now we need public comment. And I am again asking for public comment in the meeting room. And there's no public comment here. Madam Moderator, if you can open up the Q&A for public comment, please.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And audio-only participants can raise their hand by pressing *3 on their device. And it appears there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Can we take a vote? Okay. Ms. Linden, if we could go ahead and do a roll call vote, please.
Okay, so the motion was made by Dr. Garcia, seconded by Member Mordomi. Member Hancock?
Aye.
Dr. Kawaguchi?
Aye.
Member Linden? Aye. Member Mordomi?
Aye.
Dr. Pruitt,
Aye.
Dr. Ross is back. Okay. Member Sims,
Aye.
Dr. Garcia,
I vote aye.
and Dr. Wong.
Aye.
Okay, so that's 8 votes and the motion carries.
Okay. So we're going to go on to item number.
President Wong, I have a question. When would it be appropriate to look into the formal fee study?
So it's a really good question. Member Garcia, the question was, when would it be appropriate to look at the fee study? And, you know, it's really going to be a two-step process. We need to, normally you are engaging in a fee study when the fees are already at the cap. So that's probably the first step, is pursuing the regulatory process to increase those fees to the cap. Of course, we don't know what that regulatory process will result in yet. But then a fee study is a more formal process. Various boards have engaged a contractor or a consultant to perform that work, which we may be able to start doing now, right? To engage that, to begin that process of the contracting process, right? Securing somebody to perform the study. And that's kind of the process in a nutshell. From there, the study, you know, is engaged and takes the time that it takes. Then the study shows what the study has shown, and then we would begin engaging in conversations with the legislature, the board, others, on how to move forward at that time.
Greg, do you have an estimated timeline? Is that like a year, a 2-year project?
It would depend on how we do it. I think, again, owing to the fact that we have, the whole reason why we need to engage in fees is because we have a fund condition problem. These fee studies are not free. They cost money. So would want to explore what that looks like. Would want to explore the possibility of being able to do it in-house with the budget office, precisely to save those dollars. You know, if we were to engage in a formal contracting process, I believe that would require, you know, an RFP, the request for proposals and all of that. So I admittedly don't know how long that work takes, probably a few months. I think my preference would be to do it in-house to save the money, and not make that fee problem worse. Probably a few months to complete the study itself, to do the work to actually build the study. So, you know, maybe half a year, 9 months, in terms of engaging in the process to secure a contractor if we went that route, but then also the time to perform the actual workload for the study. So 6 months to 9 months maybe to do the whole thing. Timing becomes important because you want to have the study, because this would require a statutory change, you want to have the study done in time to inform the legislature of any necessary statutory changes. So possibility of looking, you know, statutes normally take effect on Jan 1 of every year. So looking at where we are now, a third of the way, you know, partially through 2023, probably the earliest we would be able to have fees in place would be Jan 1 of 25 in terms of raising the caps. So the study would be, we have plenty of time to do a study between now and then.
Would it be inappropriate to request staff to have some initial proposals for the May meeting or the subsequent meeting, just to kind of get moving in that direction?
A proposal for increasing the fees above the cap?
Some options, whether it's an in-house cost, projected cost for doing it through a contractor, just so we kind of have some ideas. So so we can get moving on it sooner than later.
Yeah, so following the approval of the motion today, following today's meeting, staff will begin immediately working with the budget office. We'll have to do some workload calculations to be prepared for, to comply with the motion for the May meeting. So all of that all of that work will begin commencing.
Thank you.
I just make, this is Member Linden, just one comment because I might not be here in May, but I just want to agree with what Dr. Kawaguchi had said. I think, I know that it's still the beginning stages of creating any kind of language or a proposal, but I feel like it is somewhat important, at least for the optician program, to distinguish between the individuals who are receiving licenses versus the businesses. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Linden.
Any other comments? Well, then let's go ahead and go on to item number 4, which is the board president's report. That's me.
President Wong, this is Mark Morodomi. I need to deal with a plumbing emergency for the next few minutes. Will the board maintain a quorum if I absent myself for a few minutes?
Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yes, we'll have 7. We'll have 7. We'll hopefully see you in a little bit, Mark. Okay, now that we're absent Mr. Morodomi, we still have quorum, so we're going to go on to item number 4, which is the board president's report. And the only thing I have today on my report is to call for board officer nominations. So it is that time of the year again. We're going to, I'll call for nominations, and then we will not vote for officers until May, at our May meeting. Do I just start with the president, or do I go start with secretary? I'm just going to go ahead and call for any nominations, either from the public or from our remote members or from our in-person members as well.
This is Member Garcia. I'd like to nominate Member Wong for president.
And anyone else have any other nominations? So I'd like to make nominations also. I'd like to nominate Dr. Garcia for vice president and Ms. Linden, Ms. Uni Linden for secretary. Do I need to take public comment?
You can take public comment for this item, but also, are there any issues with any of the nominees accepting or refusing the nomination? Or does anyone decline? Well, not interested.
So I don't think anyone is declining the nominations right now. Well, Dr. Garcia, I, and Ms. Linden are in person, so I think we're okay here.
Okay, yeah, you can
And
go
then
ahead.
I'll just go ahead and ask for public comment in the meeting room. And Madam Moderator, if you could open up the Q&A for public comment as well.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And audio-only participants can raise their hand by pressing *3 on their device. I'll pause a moment to allow the public time to access these features and submit their requests. All right, and seeing none, would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Okay, so we can keep it open for nominations. Ballots they need to be received to our office by Friday, March 31st, and we will then vote on officers in May. Let's go ahead and go on to item number 5, which is discussion and possible approving meeting minutes for October 10th, December 9th, and January 27th. Ms. Linden, do you have any? So does anyone have any comments on any of the minutes from October 10th, 2022, December 9th, 2022, or January 27th, 2023?
Staff does.
Okay.
I will, I think, take this one from Member Morodomi. On the December 9, 2022 minutes, I've tried my best here to identify it. It's page 12 of the PDF, third paragraph, third line from the bottom of that paragraph. Replace the word confidence in the phrase professional expert confidence to say competence. So it should read professional expert competence. So that was an item via Member Morodomi for the December 9 minutes. And is it okay if I point out an item on the January minutes? The January 27, 2023 minutes, it's page 19 of the PDF. Under the heading Board Meeting Draft Minutes, we need to add Friday, January 27, 2023.
So if no one else has any other comments regarding the minutes, could I get a motion to pass minutes for October 10th, 2022, December 9th, 2022, and January 27th, 2023? Oh, subject to the corrections. Thank you. Someone want to make a motion?
This is Member Garcia. I would like to make a motion to approve the minutes as corrected for October 10th, 2022, December 9, 2022, and January 27, 2023.
Can I get a second? Do one of you guys want to second it?
Oh, this is Member Linden. I will second.
Okay, we'll go ahead. Dr. Garcia made the motion, Ms. Linden made the second, and I'm now going to ask for public comment in the hearing room. And there's no public comment here. Madam Moderator, if you can open up the Q&A for public comment, please.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And audio-only participants can raise their hand by pressing *3 on their device. And it appears there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. And Ms. Linden, if we could have a roll call vote, please.
Okay. Member Hancock?
Aye.
Dr. Kawaguchi?
Aye.
Member Linden? Aye. Member Mordomi? Absent. Dr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Member Sims?
Aye.
Dr. Garcia?
Aye.
And Dr. Wong?
Aye.
Okay, so that's 7 votes and the motion carries.
Perfect. Thank you. Let's go ahead and go on to item number 6, Executive Officers Report.
Thank you, President Wong and members. Gregory Pruden, Interim Executive Officer, presenting Agenda Item 6A, Executive Officers Report Program Update. This is like a sort of a new item that we're going to start bringing to the board at each board meeting, program update, to kind of let everybody know some items that we've been working on and what's going on. So you'll see in the memo that staff put together for this item a couple announcements of some staff changes. We have Jonathan Gasca, who joined the board in October. He's actually in the room with us here, physically present. He is the board's policy analyst and will be primarily responsible for working on our regulations and legislative items. We'll also be helping us out with staffing our board and committee meetings, as well as outreach and communications. Kathleen Gregorio joined the board in December of last year. She serves as the licensing technician for the Mobile Optometric Office program. She is replacing Eric Pomthivi, who left the board in December. Until we have the MOO program, the Mobile Optometric Office program, implemented, Katie is training on licensing procedures for optometry and opticianry, and helping out on the enforcement program as well. At the beginning of February, all staff for the board participated in a team building training called Color Lingo, which we felt was quite productive, and we had a lot of fun sort of learning our personality colors. So that was an exciting day. We are currently recruiting for 2 positions on our team. One is an enforcement staff services analyst, and we have a staff service analyst recruitment on the licensing side as well. We're hopeful that these positions will be filled by the May board meeting, and look forward to introducing these new team members at that time, hopefully. A couple DCA items. It was mentioned earlier in today's meeting, the Organizational Improvement Office project that we have recently started with DCA. This is going to be a year-long project that will touch all aspects of our programs. We are presently engaged with the Organizational Improvement Office folks on the licensing side, specifically the optometry licensing side. And we're hopeful to be done with the work on that side in time for the optometry graduation season, which we know will be upon us sooner rather than later. What does this look like? Well, this looks like the Organizational Improvement Office and our team sitting down for lengthy conversations, essentially learning how a application in this current context is processed from the very beginning step until the very final step. So at the current moment, we're building what is referred to as our as-is processes. And once we are finished building the current process for each application type, we will move to designing what is referred to as a could-be process map. And so this will be the opportunity that we have to discover efficiencies that we can realize on the licensing side. Once optometry licensing side is done going through this project, the optician licensing program will go through, as well as the enforcement team and the administrative team of the board. So we're very excited about the opportunities that we have to realize some process improvements through this project. An update on another DCA update. Danny Rogers, who was the board's regulatory counsel, her last day with DCA was February 24th. Until a replacement is hired, our regulations are being handled by Grace Arupo Rodriguez, who is the Assistant Deputy Director for Legal. I understand that a new regulatory counsel assigned to our board might be coming down the pipeline in the next few weeks, so excited to meet that individual and begin to catch them up to speed on the board's regulatory work, which we'll talk about here shortly. Some outreach and communication items. At the end of last month, February 24th and 25th, myself, the interim executive officer, attended the California Optometric Association House of Delegates meeting. It was a very, very fruitful opportunity for the board to get in front of many of our licensees. We shared a lot of information related to continuing education and had some really good conversations with the folks there. Earlier that month in February, I met with Capital Strategic Advisors, who represents National Vision. They have a lot of locations in California that we license, just making introductions with our stakeholders. And then I want to call the board's attention and members of the public to the anniversary year that the Board of Optometry has. So 2023 marks a series of very important milestones for this board that we should celebrate and recognize. It marks 120 years since the state of California recognized optometry in the state of California and regulated its practice. It's also 110 years since the Optometry Practice Act was enacted, which created this board. And it marks 100 years since this board promulgated its very first rule or regulation, and that rule required all applicants to meet specified educational requirements. And I learned, just as a brief aside, when I attended House of Delegates, that 2023 also coincides with the 100-year anniversary of the Berkeley School of Optometry. So a very important milestone year for those of us in the optometry world. At the end of this item here, we've included the organizational chart, so the board and members of the public can see how we are currently organized. And it shows many of our vacancies. Just a note on this item, you'll see it's dated January 1st of this year. So there have been a few changes since this org chart was formally approved, but we have included that org chart here for your attention as well. Happy to take any questions on agenda item 6A.
I just have a comment. I wanted to highlight and thank you and the staff for going through the team development. I think it's been quite a while. We had the pandemic going on, so thank you for doing that. I hope all of you appreciated it. It really does help the team be more efficient when they can communicate with each other.
Thank you for that. Yeah, you got to take public comment on each one. Right? I want to do it at the very.
Yeah, at the very end. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and take public comment at the very end of the executive officer report.
Next, we are moving to agenda item 6B, which is going to be a report on our enforcement program. And I am pleased to present to the board and members of the public Terry Villarreal, the board's lead enforcement analyst, who is going to join us here and present agenda item 6B. Hi, Terry.
Good morning, everyone. So the newsletter, the board's newsletter has gone through some changes recently, and one of them is a name change. It's now called The Spectacle, and this is the last time that you'll see it under the enforcement tab, I guess, under the enforcement part of the report, because of the name change and because we want to get the message out about different things that the board is working on. We decided to include everything that we can in the newsletter, not only enforcement. So we're including information about licensing, information about continuing education. We're including articles. Dr. Ross wrote one for us that you'll see in the upcoming newsletter, which will be published in hopefully in April, because it's the spring newsletter. We're also going to include information about Breeze, because we get a lot of telephone calls from licensees and individuals that struggle to use Breeze. So we're going to try to include different information with each quarterly edition to help users navigate more easily through Breeze, because it can be a challenge. And we are also including information about candidates, for candidates, so they can be informed about what to do and what not to do when they become licensed as, you know, an optometrist or an optician. So we're going to include a lot of different information in the spectacle, and we're not sure where it's going to fall under the, you know, as we report to the board in our meetings, but it'll be someplace. Any questions about the spectacle?
I just wanted to compliment you and all the staff, because I've been reading it, and it has a lot of good information. So I would just encourage everyone to read it. You guys have done an excellent job.
Thank you. We get a little bit of information from everyone. From, for example, Randy provided a lot of information about for the upcoming edition in relation to candidates and licensees, and so that was really helpful. But yeah, it's a group effort. You know, we reach out to the board members when we can, and Dr. Huang, we may be reaching out to you for the next edition. So that might be coming.
Member Garcia, I just want to echo Dr. Huang's comments. It's a very professional-looking publication, and I think it really goes a long way communicating with our licensees, and, you know, it's something that maybe hasn't been done so well in the past, but this really does touch all the licensees. It provides a lot of really good information, keeps people out of trouble, and it really puts the board in a good light to our licensees. So I think, you know, just overall, it's a huge plus for the board, and, you know, all thanks go to the staff for doing such a good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll let the others know that the other enforcement staff that are not able to be here or listen today. I was going to see something else about it, and I just don't remember what that is. Maybe I'll come back to it.
I had a question.
Yes.
So if one wanted to find the latest edition on the website, how would one do that?
You know, the latest edition is always on the home page of our website. It stays there for a little while, and then it moves to the consumer tab, I believe, which is a tab at the top of the board's website. So you might be able to find it there. If you're still struggling, you can send me an email and I can help you identify where it is.
So I was just trying to look for it under publications and under forms and publications.
It should be there.
And the last newsletter we have under forms and publications is spring 2018. So,
okay.
Member Moridomi, if you go to the home page and scroll down just a tiny bit, maybe halfway, you'll see optometrist/optician news and resources. And the second link there, check out CSBO's new quarterly newsletter, The Spectacle, will take you to the current edition. But what you're also noticing, and staff and team knows about it, we've got to do some website cleanup. We've been talking about that at the staff level as well. So
Great.
that's
all
something ongoing.
That's all I need to hear. Thank you.
I remembered what I wanted to say, and the reason why we're including so much information in the Spectacle is the board receives a lot of telephone calls, and not that we don't like talking to our customers, but we're trying to cut down on some telephone calls. Just so, you know, we're trying to make the newsletter all-encompassing, so maybe individuals get the information that they need just by reading the Spectacle. That's one of our goals. Any other questions about it? Okay.
Thank you, Terry. One of the things that I'd just like to point out, that just kind of following up on what Terry is mentioning, is we want to kind of move on the Spectacle to a more thematic, if you will, sort of design. So one of the ways I think we can accomplish that is by reconvening our committees, including our Communications and Outreach Public Relations Committee. I think there's a real role for them to play here to help us at the staff level design, themes, if you will, right? We all know, for example, when optometry graduation season is, and so it makes sense to focus, I think, the next spring edition pointing toward that issue. But we'd certainly like to convene that subcommittee of the board next month and get back to using our committee work to help inform and set the priorities for all of us at the staff level.
So the next item is the statistics for the optometry program and the opticianry program. This is just a continuance of information that we provide. This is information on the second quarter for each program. Any questions?
So, Terry, can I ask you, looking at the report, and it's a very thorough report, thank you. Is there a way for us to identify the high risk, or I guess high risk cases versus just our regular complaint cases?
So the high risk cases are listed on the second page for each program at the very bottom. And so it would be other legal actions, PC 23, and interim suspension.
President Wong, are you asking about a breakdown of our total volume of current open complaints broken down into a high priority, normal priority? Is that what you're asking about?
Okay.
We'd probably have to come back at a future meeting with that information, but I think that's something that we can put together. And
so even though even though it's not in the report, we have two different categories
We have, I believe, 3 different categories.
Okay.
Yes.
And then I also have another, oh wait, I'm sorry. Mark, you have a question or a comment? Mark, you're muted.
Sorry. Can you highlight where we have some backlog, serious backlog concerns in enforcement?
So you want me to highlight the backlog that we have?
Wait, Mark, you're still muted.
Areas that in the report that show any areas of serious backlog. I know there's always going to be a backlog, but are there areas that you think have growing areas of backlog, or I can't really define serious. I'll leave that to you. But where do you think we have areas of serious backlog?
Well, I know that we do have a backlog, but we are catching up on our older complaints. It's a continuous effort by enforcement staff, and it's not anything that we can immediately fix, but we continue to work on the backlog. Does that answer your question?
Let's see now. Sort of.
So
I mean, are the backlogs, for example, in opticianry or in optometry?
So I know we have some long cycle periods for some of our cases. Is that what you're referring to, Mark?
It could be, yes.
Since our last board meeting, we have closed 26 of our older cases out of 49.
So, Mark, maybe I'll give you, Member Mordomi, give you a little bit of maybe additional color here. One of the BCPs that the board received in the relatively recent past provided some positions on the enforcement side, and including an enforcement manager, among other positions. And so as part of that, the enforcement team has been diligently looking at the older cases, as Terry just alluded to, and has made the processing and of those complaints a high priority. So there was a backlog, if you will, on older cases, and again, staff has been prioritizing that for the last several months, and is making pretty solid progress on that. So, but I think we could probably come back at a future meeting with a little bit of an additional breakdown on complaints, certainly into the specific categories that the complaints are placed in, if that would be helpful.
It might be. I just looking at this, I don't know what the backlog is or where to look to see where the backlog is, and get an understanding of what the backlog is. So thank you.
Okay. Dr. Wong, did you have a question?
No, it just looks like, it looks like you have long cycle times, but it sounds like you guys have closed a significant number of cases.
That's
lately,
what it is,
so
exactly. Yes.
Right. Oh.
Any other questions?
Any questions? Do we need public comment?
We're going to wait till the end.
Okay. Oh, yeah, thank you.
I have a question. I'm sorry, you might not have seen my hand raised there. This is Member Sims. I just wanted to, I know President Wong did mention that we wanted to know what the highest risk ones are, but I do want to also know all of the categories of complaints. So do you have categories that represent the types of complaints that you're getting? I would like to know all of those categories.
Member Sims, appreciate that. Would you like, I know you just said all of them, but you want people complain under a variety of areas, right? Would it be helpful to have like a top 5? Or
that would
do
be
you
fine.
want
Whatever way that you typically triage those,
okay,
that's fine. I mean, if you categorize them as in categories of 5, that's great. But just so that we have an idea of what are some of those complaints and of course, those that you get a lot of would be helpful for the board.
Certainly, we can bring that back at the May meeting.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any other questions or comments towards Terry and enforcement? No? All right, thank you, Terry.
You're welcome.
Next one's me.
Okay.
Next one's me.
And this one's you. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Terry. Going to present agenda item 6B II. This is really just an informational item for the board and for members of the public. I've put together a memo here for your purview. But essentially what this item is at the end of calendar year 2022, so last year, the entire department received a letter from a group of stakeholders that had been originally involved in the passage of Assembly Bill 2138. And Assembly Bill 2138 was a bill that was passed in 2018 that applied to essentially all DCA boards and bureaus, including our board, which restricted our discretion in using certain criminal history or other disciplinary action when it comes to making a licensure determination. And as just mentioned, this coalition that was originally involved in the passage of that bill reached out to the department and essentially sent a letter to the department letting the department know from their perspective which of the department's boards and bureaus were doing a good or bad job in terms of implementing AB 2138 and how they were doing in displaying information related to criminal conviction and disciplinary history. Now, the Board of Optometry we weren't named at all. We weren't a good example, nor were we a bad example, but in talking with the team, we thought it might be a good opportunity for us to put together an FAQ and be proactive, if you will, in displaying information for licensees and potential future applicants. So we did exactly that and worked with our legal counsel to put together that FAQ, and that FAQ is contained in your packet. It's also been posted on our website and distributed via our listserv as well. So really, again, just an informational item here for the board. No action, but just wanted to let the board and members of the public know what we are doing to spread information related to AB 2138. Are there any questions on that item? Let's keep going. Yeah, let's keep going.
Hi, Board Member Sims. No question, but I just wanted to say this is excellent. Having those FAQs are important, and that's also one of the reasons why I was asking for there to be if you could be informed about categories for complaints, because if you see a trend of particular types of complaints, then you could possibly do an FAQ that would inform the staff and board on what might be good FAQs to maybe avoid some of the complaints that you get a lot of. So thank you for introducing these FAQs and hope to see that in other areas as well.
Definitely. Thank you for the feedback. If there's no other questions from members of the board at this time, I believe we have our next item, which is agenda item 6C, examination and licensing programs, and Randy Love is going to present this item.
Hello, board members. So, as I've said before, our licensing program works continuously with the Department of Consumer Affairs to increase the functionality of Breeze for both staff and our users. We push out, there are updates made to Breeze every month. So, and unfortunately, there's a limited amount of things that we can do with each update. So we've got some information about what is coming in the next few updates. In March, for example, we're removing more of the applications associated with the branch office license, which no longer exists as of a few years ago. We are updating the cures fee, which is effective April 1st. It's a reduction. A fix to an issue with the interface between Breeze and PSI for people who need to take the exam as part of restoring an expired or canceled optometrist license. And then in April, we're going to have some more changes, including the correct name for the registered dispensing optician registration, which was changed, more mailing address functionality, including the optometrist pocket license will now be able to come directly to your mailing address instead of your address of record. And then for things like the renewal application for optometrists, when you are selecting to renew inactive, it's going to skip the question about continuing education because there is no requirement. Future updates are going to include further updates to our registration names and the ability to order a letter of verification from your Breeze dashboard. Currently, if you are trying to apply in another state, you have to send a written request and a check for $40 to the board. In order to get that, we're going to actually put that on your Breeze dashboard. You can just plug it in, send in the payment, and it will send out the letter. We'll also be adding some long overdue applications to the Breeze dashboard, including the applications for immunization certificates and retired optometrists and retired volunteer optometrists. So lots of changes coming to Breeze over the next few months. And but beyond that, as Terry discussed earlier, licensing staff contributed to the upcoming edition of the Spectacle, which will cover some new optometrist license information, like how do you get your license and what do you do when you renew for the first time. We also have some statistical overview, and it is for Q1 and Q2 of the current fiscal year. So if you have any questions, I will be happy to try to answer them.
Member Garcia, Randy, excellent job.
Thank you.
Very good report. I just had one item to add maybe to a future update on Breeze. It would be the fee waiver for active duty optometrists.
It is on there.
Okay.
That is something I think that we have to go in and add it manually. So there might be some adjustments that we can make to make it more functional.
Right.
But I will make a note of that so we can see what we can do about it.
I had one active duty optometrist reach out to me for help, and I wasn't able to help him. Thank you.
I have a general question. From the time that we submit a request for a change with Breeze, how long does it usually take?
It depends on a lot of things, including what the priorities of those requests are, because there are so many changes that we want to make. Every month they check in with us and say, here's the list, and we can go in and order them. So if we have something that is like a high priority change, we could move it up in the queue. But for things that are just kind of like changing the name, stuff that's like more cosmetic, that kind of can take a little bit longer. So in general, I would say maybe 6 to 9 months, but in that it's going to vary depending on how important the change is.
And the importance is determined by our staff?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Member Kawaguchi, I think what we might, probably should do it as a staff for a future board meeting related to this topic is to present or provide a list of those items that we have in progress. As Randy just mentioned, they have different priorities. We're one of 36 other boards and bureaus that, well, not everybody's on Breeze, but we're one of, let's say, 20. I can't remember the exact number off the top. There are other programs that are submitting what they also feel are very high priority changes. So I think it would be helpful for you and the board to probably be presented with a list displaying, right, sort of what we have in progress and what the status of those are, so we can work on putting something like that together and displaying it at a future meeting. Looks like we have Member Moridomi has his hand up.
Hi, thanks. I know the formats of these reports have changed over the course of time. My question is, where in this report would I see whether or not we have any backlogs in our licensing program? I think the answer to my question regarding the enforcement program was to look at the statistic on cycle times to see if there was a backlog in enforcement. Is there a similar statistic in this report? I kind of recall there was something in prior reports that it would say where our backlogs were in the licensing space. But I don't see that in these reports. Am I correct?
So there isn't anything for like applications pending, which is something that we could potentially provide in the future. Is there something else that you would want to see that would give you kind of that information?
Well, I guess I don't know what I don't know what to ask for. I imagine that the executive officer knows whether or not there's backlogs in our licensing. So whatever information the executive officer receives as to where the choke points are would be interesting for I think the board to be aware of.
So Member Moridomi, again, I think we have an opportunity here to present, again, it would have to be at a future meeting, but we have an opportunity to present more robust information. I do know what you're referring to and talking about, and I do think we have the ability to display graphs and additional data that would visually assist in answering the types of questions that you're asking in terms of volume of applications, right, and the cycle times, processing times, things of that sort. So we can, staff and I will explore how that can be presented and designed and aim to bring that back at the May meeting.
Yeah, I thought that was included in past reports. I could be wrong. I don't want to impose more work on staff every month, but it is an area that I think the board is responsible for understanding, periodically to know, A, whether there's a backlog, and B, where those backlogs are.
So 2 additional points, Member Moridomi. One, I've been in my role for about 4 months, and I'm learning a lot. And one of the things that I'm learning is about exactly what you're asking about, displaying and reporting of data. And have a training later this month that I am taking to learn, for example, our QBERT system, which is a database system that my understanding as of right now is that system will be able to display a lot of the data and information that you are asking about here. So I think that what you're asking for is not an imposition. It's not difficult for us to do or comply with. And I think we should be able to do that by the May meeting. Second point would be, I think at the December meeting, we did report to the board that we did have a backlog in the fictitious name permit application. Those applications had largely sat untouched for most of last year. I can report to you today that we do not have a backlog in the fictitious name permits any longer. We have processed more than 100 applications on the fictitious name permit side over the last several months. And again, I think we can display some of this information in a visual way at the May meeting. At the moment, that is the backlog, if you will, that I'm aware of. You know, optometry licensing season is very cyclical, right? And so we are not seeing an influx of optometry initial license applications at this point. But I hope that additional information is responsive to your question and points.
Yes, thank you.
So Mark spurred on an additional comment related to the spectacle. So when we do hit that really heavy season of licensing, the most common question I receive is, how long is it going to take for me to get my license? And if we have the data and we have the ability to share that out, not just with the board, but also maybe through the spectacle, it would definitely cut down on questions that I get, which means reduce questions that the staff gets, because there's going to be an understanding of what the current normal is.
The spring spectacle should have information regarding that. We're still in draft and in progress on that item, but that spring spectacle is aimed at trying to accomplish exactly what you just mentioned, so that folks know. We would love to reduce or eliminate phone calls and emails that we receive regarding what's the status of my application. One way that we can do that is by improving our communication and customer service, which is another area that I know we discussed that at the December board meeting, but that's another opportunity I think that we have to communicate so that folks know that we are in receipt of your application, we are working it, we are processing it. So yeah, I think we're going to be able to provide some of that information in the newsletter and in other forums. Was there any other questions for Randy on this item? Okay. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item, we're still on agenda item 6. We are now on agenda item 6D. This is the regulatory update. At the December 9, 2022 board meeting, board members requested staff bring back a status update report regarding board-approved regulatory packages, and agenda item 6D is responsive to that request. There are a total of 7 board-approved regulatory packages that are included in this item, and we have included updated information for all of them. The mobile optometric office regulation is in progress. Jonathan, our new board policy analyst, is working on that regulation along with myself. Not a lot of work was performed on that regulation since it was board approved, but again, with Jonathan on team, him and myself are actively working that regulation, and we look forward to bringing more updated information related to that regulation to the May meeting. The continuing education regulation, I am happy to announce to the board and members of the public that regulation is now out of the department. That regulation is now at agency as part of the regulatory review process. Once the Department of Consumer Affairs legal office has approved our regulation package, it moves over to agency for their review. That regulation went over to agency at the end of February. It should be at agency for around a month, so we're expecting to receive it back by the end of this month. And from there, it would be officially filed and noticed with the Office of Administrative Law. So again, that regulation, the CE regulations, has made it out of the department and is moving along in the process. The remainder of the regulations on this list, numbers 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, having to do with the implementation of AB 458, the optometry disciplinary guidelines, the optician program omnibus regulatory changes, and the dispensing optician disciplinary guidelines, and the requirements for glaucoma certification. None of those board-approved regulation package have been officially started at board staff level. Recognize that this is board direction and that we need to carry out. And so myself and staff are making it a priority to commence work on all of these regulations that are board approved, and we look forward to bringing at the next meeting and future meetings further updates on these regulation packages. Happy to answer any questions from members related to agenda item 6D.
Greg?
Yes.
Member Morodomi here. Thank you for the report and its honesty, admitting that nothing's been done on certain regulations. I think we have to be transparent about that. So thank you very much. It's a hard message to make, but I understand given the staff shortages and the changes in administration, it happens. I do know that on AB 458, the message was a little bit different from your oral remarks, that staff has begun working on that, whereas the other ones say hasn't been started yet. So is that just a difference of only a minor degree there?
Yeah, I appreciate you pointing that out. I think there's probably a draft or two. So perhaps I misspoke as it relates to item number 3. I would just underscore that one was board approved nearly 2 years ago. So I think part of the issue with some of these regulations is given the length of time from which they were previously board approved and further changes to law and just other changes, several of them perhaps need to be looked at again by the board, especially as we get into some of the disciplinary guidelines. I think the optometry disciplinary guidelines were last board approved in 2019. So there's been a series of changes that have happened statutorily since then that certainly would require taking a second look and determining whether we need to make further changes that would have to come to the board for board approval before we could move forward with the formal rulemaking package. So that's part of what what myself and staff need to do as it relates to items 3, 4, 5, and 6, and 7 of these regulations.
I mean, I will note, just given my personal champion of the Nazarian bill, that my understanding is that the home residence practice cannot happen until we get these regulations up and running. So I think that's really an unfortunate result for the public that I think would benefit from the home residence practice, and makes me think the next time I help with legislation, I'll put language in there that says it goes into effect even before the optometry board of optometry has a chance to put in regulations, because it seems like we are the choke point, which is unfortunate. Anyway, that's just a comment. Thanks.
Member Morodomi, we receive a frequent inquiry from members of the public regarding the broad topic of mobile opticianry. It's not just 458, it's also the mobile optometric office program, right? So you are right. Every single one of these regulations has been board approved for a reason, because it's an important priority. I would say, just to address from a broad perspective, sort of the latter part of your comment, we are a small board, and one of the reasons why not a lot of work was was done was because we did lose the main person that we had on team to perform this work. One way that a small board can be helped out in the regulatory realm is to avoid having to do regulations. So to your comment about statute being perhaps more specific or more implementable upon it being enacted, it certainly goes a long way to help a small program carry out its work. That's also something that's not ahistorical to this program. We have, for example, the immunization certificate. That application was not one that we had to design in a regulatory process. It's written right into the statute. It looks a little awkward and odd, but it was very helpful because we didn't have to go engage in a regulatory process to create and design that form. So again, just trying to underscore the point here that when you're a small program implementing a host of regulations that are all different from each other can be very difficult to do all at one time. The more specific statute can be would be very helpful.
So I wanted to make a comment. Thank you for finally pushing through the continuing education regulation. It's actually been going on since 2015, and I would say that's the watch out for the board, because the watch out to the board is as time goes on, things change, new information comes, but if we don't follow through with something that we said we're going to do, then we run the risk of it bleeding on and bleeding on and bleeding on. So sometimes you got to get something done, and then if something new comes along, then you got to go back again and start again. But this has been a long run. Thank you for getting that one through.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, this is Member Linden. Yeah, I just want to thank you for providing all this information in a very clear way. To see it all, it seems a bit overwhelming, and knowing that it is a small board and a small staff, it just seems like an overwhelming amount of work. I know before you talked about the importance of, resuming in a more robust manner some of the different committees that we have. And so I just, want to try to say, if we as a board member want to see these things progress and move on, if there are things that we can do to try to help, push things forward, whether it's, getting the committees more involved, because I know a lot of them have been kind of lapsed lately. But yeah, I think we're on the same page. We would love to see this work progress. And along with Mark's point about the regulations for AB 458, I know that one, and then the mobile optometric office, because as Mark said, that that legislation can't really go into effect until the regs come out, or with the mobile optometric office, we're kind of past that statutory guideline. I'm not sure how progress on these is going to be prioritized, but if there's, I don't know if it makes sense to prioritize the ones that have the legislative deadlines, but yeah, maybe that could be one suggestion.
I certainly appreciate that, Member Linden. You're right, it's challenging trying to balance the priority of all of them, because I think any one of us can make a strong argument for any one of them as being like a number one priority. I'll just kind of add to what you just said as it relates to the optician program. We don't even have disciplinary guidelines on that program. Optometry disciplinary guidelines, I believe, are from 2012. So the good news is that we at least have some on that side of our program. But again, we don't even have any on the optician program, and so we rely on the Administrative Procedures Act. And that makes things a little more challenging when we're working through enforcement issues and things of that sort on the optician program. So I just thought I'd add that. On the MOVE program, again, there's a revenue angle there, right? So it's, not just important that we implement the will of the legislature as was directed, but it's also important for our board because there's that revenue angle. It's also important public policy, right? That folks are able to go out there and provide these services. So the MOVE one is a huge priority for us. As you just mentioned, the statutory due date was Jan 1 of this year, and we didn't meet that. So we are endeavoring to make significant progress on that reg. and all of these regs, but also knowing that there's more regs to come, right? Like a fee reg, for example, possibly, and any future legislation that that might have a regulatory implementation angle as well. So, yeah, all of these things are tough to balance, but I think one of the ways that we'll be able to do that is by bringing them to the subcommittee. And so we have an opportunity to do that this coming April, just next month, with the Legislative and Regulatory Committee, and it's my intention to convene that committee and have these really detailed conversations so that we can be better about implementing. I see that Member Moridomi has his hand up.
Mark, you're muted.
To take a little bit of heat off the executive officer, if you want to come to the board and say, I have all these things to do and only this little bandwidth, please set priorities. I'm sure either the Ledge Reg Committee or the board will be willing to give you our list of priorities so that you're not dealing with individual board members saying, oh, this is more important, or another board member saying, no, it's something else that's more important. You can have board direction as to how to prioritize these kinds of things. So that's one thought. Another random thought is, I thought the mobile optometric office statute had language in there that allowed folks to conduct the nonprofit mobile optometric clinics as to the at the date of the passage of the legislation without waiting for board regulations. It's just they're kind of unregulated right now, but I think they're permitted to go ahead and proceed. Is my recollection.
Yeah, we are aware there are folks out there operating. Yeah. Seeing no other comments or questions from board members, I'm happy to move on. I think we need to take public comment on this item, though, all of the items.
It looks like public comment. We have someone for public comment in the hearing room.
Hello again, good morning. Again, my name's Steve Keller, and this is why I came up here, because I do have some questions that I'd like to get clarified. A little bit of background. I've been affiliated with Loma Linda University Ophthalmology Department, and they have a Grand Rounds program, pardon me, which is every other Wednesday, they have an hour and a half of Grand Rounds where the ophthalmology residents present cases. And it's some of the best continuing education that I've ever been privileged to attend. And the problem that we've had is that the optometrists that attend it, there's just no way to traditionally get the continuing education credentialed, because it's every other week, and in order to get it credentialed, it's I don't know, it would cost too much because of the frequency of the Grand Rounds. And you in applying for accreditation for continuing education, you have to have the agenda and what exactly is going to be discussed in those meetings, and oftentimes the residents don't even know what's going to be discussed, a week prior to that. So I saw in these new regulations, and it's my understanding that you had said, Gregory, that they're at agency and regulatory review, so none of these are set in stone yet. But I was wondering, as the Grand Rounds couldn't be credentialed traditionally, so to speak, could it qualify as self-study? And if so, what are the better definitions of self-study to this class of continuing education?
On this one. So I appreciate that. I think it might be best if you and I connect directly?
Yes, and I don't want to take too much of the board's
Following this,
meeting time. Is there anyone who I can contact to be in touch with on the board?
I'll give you my email right now.
Okay.
It's Gregory, Gregory, .Pruden, Pruden, at dca.ca.gov.
Okay, that's good. And I know, because I tried to address this several months ago and sent out an email that just went into the abyss,
Yeah.
and I never heard back.
Okay.
So
You got me on record now.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And is there any other public comment in the hearing room? Madam Moderator, if you could open up the Q&A for public comment, please.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And audio-only participants can raise their hand by pressing *3 on their device. And it looks like we do have one request for public comment from James Deerdorf. And James, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Afternoon already. Yeah, we've been working on a mobile optometric office here in Ventura, Santa Barbara County. And if I understood the discussion that took place a few minutes ago, is that there are several people doing mobile optometric offices that, even though there's no regulations regulating that. And I'd like to know, if we proceed, will we be in legal trouble to start a mobile optometric office?
Can I make a comment?
I appreciate the comment, Mr. Deerdorf. Unfortunately, not able to give legal advice in this forum, but be happy to speak with you regarding this issue. I just read out my email, but I'd be happy to give it again.
Yeah, would you give it to me again?
Sure. It's Gregory.Pruden at dca.ca.gov. That's Gregory.Pruden, Pruden, at dca.ca.gov.
Okay, I will do that. Yeah, because we're all set to purchase a bus to convert into a mobile optometric office, and we'd like to be able to proceed. And it seems like things are running very slowly, and at least you guys admitted that. So I'll contact you directly. Thank you.
I look forward to hearing from you, sir.
This is Member Garcia. I do have a question for the caller. Are you affiliated with a nonprofit?
This is the moderator. I apologize, James Deerdorf. I thought your comment was over, so I muted you. You'll need to click the unmute me button one more time.
Okay.
My apologies.
We've been working with the Salvation Army here in Ventura County and Sea International out of Santa Barbara, and Rotary clubs and Lions clubs. But the Salvation Army would be the main nonprofit participant in our mobile optometric office.
Great, thank you. Madam Moderator, are there any other comments, public comments?
Yes, this is the moderator. I have a request from individual logged in as Joe Neville. And Joe, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Afternoon. Yes, my name is Joe Neville. Just wanted to confirm that you can hear me okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I'm with the National Association of Optometrists and Opticians. And back in 2021, Assembly Bill 1534 was passed. And there were materials and conversation from the Board of Optometry about adopting or proposing, I guess, regulations related to the non-resident ophthalmic lens dispensers. I haven't seen that on the list. I'm curious if there are going to be proposed regulations. And part of my question is because I've gone onto the board's website to see if there's a form that's actually been put out there for eyeglass sellers that would fit this category and can't seem to get into any forms. So again, the question, are regs coming and is the form generally available if it already exists? Thank you.
Yep. Madam Moderator, are there any other questions or comments?
This is the moderator. Appears there are no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so I'd like to propose that we take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and do items number 7 and 8 and 9. Okay, so 10 minutes, please.
Is he asking about?
All right, so thank you, everybody. We are back from break, and we are now going to move on to item number 7, discussion and possible action on legislation.
Thank you, President Wong and members. Greg Pruden, Interim Executive Officer, presenting agenda item 7, discussion and possible action on legislation. In your meeting materials, we have a memo put together with quite a bit of information related to this item. But want to make the board aware that the legislature reconvened earlier this year in January, and all bills were introduced by the deadline of February 17th. We've included here the 2023 legislative calendar with some recent and upcoming calendar highlights. We've also included a copy of the potential positions that our board can take on legislation. So those items are included in your packet here. In this memo here, pursuant to direction from the board, we've included previous legislation from 2022 and included specifically as it relates to AB 2236, which was authored by Assemblymember Lowe last year, the veto message that the governor issued. We were directed at the December meeting to come back with that message. So we've included that here in your packet. If there's any questions from members related to the calendar or possible positions or the veto message for AB 2236, I think stopping right now might be a good time to take any of those questions before I move to the discussion and possible action on 2023 bills.
Members, are there any public comments? I mean, are there any comments from members? Both, we don't have any here in the hearing room. Do I say public comment also?
No. Okay, I will proceed with presenting. We have 4 bills that we're going to present to you today that are 2023 bills. The first bill is AB 1369, authored by Assemblywoman Bauer Cahan. It's related to healing arts licensees. Current law requires DCA boards, including our board, to report within 10 working days to the Department of Healthcare Services the name and license number of any person who had their license revoked, surrendered, suspended, or made inactive. This bill, AB 1369, currently makes a non-substantive change to that section of existing law. Again, it makes a non-substantive change, so this is what we call a spot bill. It is a bill we will continue to watch to see how it is amended in the future to impact our board. I should have noted, before I go any further, that in your packet, we've included the full legislative text for all of these bills, which you can review or follow along. The next bill on our list here is AB 1570, authored by Assemblymember Lowe. Its title is Optometry Certification to Perform Advanced Procedures. This bill is a reintroduction of AB 2236, also authored by Assemblymember Lowe from last year. AB 1570 would create a new certificate type to allow optometrists to perform advanced laser surgical procedures, excision or drainage of non-recurrent lesions of the adnexa, injections for treatment of chalazia, and to administer anesthesia and corneal cross-linking procedures. Prior to receiving this certification, optometrists would be required to meet specified training, pass an exam, and complete education requirements developed by the board. The bill also requires optometrists to report any adverse treatment outcomes to the board and requires the board to review these reports in a timely manner. So this bill this is a quite expansive scope bill as it relates to the practice of optometry. Happy to take questions or comments from members at this time related to this bill, or I can proceed with the remaining two and then have that discussion at the end. Okay. The third bill, SB 340, is authored by Senator Eggman. Title of the bill is Medi-Cal Eyeglasses Prison Industry Authority. This bill, for purposes of Medi-Cal reimbursement for covered optometric services, would authorize a provider to obtain eyeglasses from a private entity as an alternative to a purchase of eyeglasses from the Prison Industry Authority. The bill would condition implementation of this provision on the availability of federal financial participation. This bill is substantially similar to Senate Bill 1089, that's 1089, which was authored by Senator Wilk. The board considered that bill, SB 1089 by Wilk, in 2022 and took a support position on it. However, that bill, SB 1089, was ultimately gut and amended into an entirely different topic, and the language the board had considered was not implemented. So again, this bill, SB 340, is essentially a reintroduction of prior year's SB 1089. Moving along to our final bill here, SB 819, also authored by Senator Eggman, Medi-Cal certification. This bill currently makes a non-substantive change to a section of the Welfare and Institutions Code that also contains existing language related to the practice of optometry. So again, this bill does not currently have any impact. It's in what we call a spot form, but the board staff will continue to track and review this bill for any future impacts. Happy to take questions and discussion or comments from members on the four bills that we have presented to you all today.
Mark, why don't you go ahead? Mark, you're muted.
I don't always want to be the first person if anyone else wants to go first, but I'll go ahead and let everyone else think about what they want to say. Regarding AB 1570, I noted the governor's veto message in a small nutshell. It notes that ophthalmologists have 3 years of training or residency, and optometrists only get 1 year in the related procedure. I think the executive officer mentioned that the education requirements would be defined by this board. Harking back to a earlier conversation that we had in a prior agenda item, to the extent that the proponents of the legislation can incorporate into the legislation the training that would be necessary to perform these procedures, rather than having us decide what that training should be, would, again, harkening back to our earlier agenda item, ease the workload and in the regulatory process for this board, if a meeting of the minds in the legislature can occur. So that's my comment on AB 1570. On SB 340, this is familiar, as the executive officer pointed out. I would strongly recommend that this board, before it takes any position on SB 340, and even though we've taken a position before, I would highly recommend that we get input from the Prison Industry Authority as to their sentiments regarding SB 340 before we take a position. I recall the last time we heard from a number of optometrists, but we didn't have a chance to hear from the other side, and I think that would be fair. That's it.
Member Moradoni and members, I probably should have, would be remiss if I failed to mention, as it relates to 1570, AB 1570, that conversations are happening related to this bill. What I mean by that is there is a meeting that I'll be attending in the next week. And on the other side, if you will, of that meeting will be my counterparts from the medical board, and I believe there may be in attendance of that meeting staff from both the California Optometric Association and perhaps the Medical Association. Excuse me. So we are engaging to begin having those conversations to hopefully be able to ultimately arrive at a place where the bill is workable for everybody. But I just thought I'd mention that to the board and to the public. I don't know if we had really an opportunity last year to engage early on this very important public policy. So we are endeavoring to do that work now, early and often going forward.
Yes, Member Garcia, just regarding AB 1570 and SB 340, again, we're all fairly familiar with both of these as we've worked through these over the past year and a half. I just want to comment that as a board, of course, public safety is our paramount concern, but so is access to health care. And both of these bills, if passed, would significantly increase access to health care / eye care here in California. So something just to keep in mind. Thank you.
No.
Why don't you go and make a comment?
If there's no other further comment from members of the public on these four bills, staff would appreciate a motion to send these four bills to the Legislative and Regulatory Committee. We intend to convene that committee in April. I'm blanking if the date is the 20th or the 21st at the moment, but it's one of those two dates. So staff would appreciate a motion to send these four bills and any other bills that we identify to the Legislative and Regulatory Committee for their further debate and discussion.
April 21st.
That committee meets on April 21st, and we would want we would be hoping that the Legislative and Regulatory Committee would meet and make a full recommendation to the board on positions, which could be potentially considered at the May meeting or another future full board meeting.
Could I get a motion?
I move.
Okay. Second? I need a second. So Mark made the motion. I just need a second for the motion.
Member Garcia will second.
Perfect. Mr. Mordomi?
So the record is clear. Would it be Member Mordomi, a motion to refer the 4 bills identified under this item to the Legislation and Regulation Committee to review and provide a recommendation to the full board at the appropriate meeting, full board meeting?
That sounds like what I would have said, but more eloquently. Yes.
Motion made by Mordomi, seconded by Garcia. Ms. Linden, if we could go ahead and, oh, I'm sorry. And now I'm going to open it up to public comment in the hearing room. And Madam Moderator, if you could open up the Q&A for public comment, please.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. And audio-only participants can raise their hand by pressing *3 on their device. I'll go ahead and pause a moment to allow the public time to access these features and submit their requests. Oh, and it looks like we do have a request from Christine Schultz. Christine, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. Please click the Unmute Me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Association. I just wanted to, thank the board for the past support for these 2 issues, the SB 340 and AB 1570. These are 2 bills that are identical to the bills that you supported in the past, and so we would appreciate your support on these bills. I understand if you have to go through the committee, but since they were identical to bills that this board has supported in the past, I was hoping to get support today. But we are committed either way to amending the bill to limit the board's regulatory requirements under especially the scope bill. We understand that the board has limited capacity to promulgate regulations, and so we want to make sure that we have provisions in there that address your concerns. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to respond.
And Madam Moderator, thank you, Christine. Madam Moderator, are there any other public comments?
This is the moderator. Appears there are no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Okay, Ms. Linden, if you could go ahead and have a roll call vote, please.
Okay, so we're voting on the motion to refer the 4 bills identified to the Legislation and Regulation Committee for review and to provide a full recommendation to provide a recommendation to the full board. Member Hancock?
Aye.
Dr. Kawaguchi?
Aye.
Member Linden? Aye. Member Mordomi?
Aye.
Dr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Member Sims?
Aye.
Dr. Garcia?
Aye.
And Dr. Wong?
Aye.
Okay, so that motion has 8 votes and it carries.
Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to item number 8, Association of Regulatory Boards of Optometry, also known as ARBO, OE Tracker, and CSBO Continuing Education Audit Program.
Thank you, President Wong and members. Greg Pruitt, Interim Executive Officer, presenting Agenda Item 8. The purpose of this item is to provide a status update on our efforts at the staff level related to the ARBO OE Tracker, as well as provide information to licensees, applicants, and members of the public related to the Optometry's Continuing Education Audit Program. Starting here with A is an update on efforts to explore linkages between the ARBO OE Tracker system and the board's BREEZE system. We have been exploring the feasibility of connecting these 2 systems and have discovered that it would take a quite extensive scoping and mapping plan to effectuate. Do not yet have an idea in terms of costs. We would not know that until we actually fully entered into a scope design. But all of that is to say that this would be at least a year-long project of scope work before it could possibly be implemented. Given that we have now engaged ourselves with the OIO process, I'm very hopeful that we'll find some further efficiencies and opportunities to do our work more effectively through that process. As mentioned earlier in an earlier item, the OIO Organizational Improvement Office project is going to be looking at all of the operations and processes that we do. Following that process, we will continue exploring linkages and communications between the two systems, while also pursuing efficiencies and opportunities at the moment to do our work more efficiently and effectively. That sort of leads into our subsequent item here, item B, on agenda item 8, which is information related to the board's CE audit program. This one is really more informational, again, for applicants and licensees to remind all of us of the importance of completing your CE, as well as a reminder that every licensed optometrist renewing attests under penalty of perjury that they have met those requirements. In the board's last sunset review, the board was faulted for its shortcomings in completing our CE audit functions. Our goal is to complete 5% every year, and we were falling short. At the same time, for those audits that we were performing, there was a pretty high failure rate on those audits. So we made a commitment, the board made a commitment coming out of the last sunset review to improve the work that we do on the CE audit program, to increase our communication, and to spread the awareness that we're being active in this area. And unfortunately, we didn't make a lot of progress over the last year or two on this in this area, but we are now. We have staff in place that are actively designing and working on the CE audit program, and we anticipate bringing information to the board at the next meeting in May to report the audit pass and fail rates for the CE audit that we are back to performing. Again, want to remind licensees and applicants of the CE requirements that are required of your license. If you are selected for an audit, you will hear from staff. It's very helpful for staff if licensees are using the ARBO OE tracker system, because our current regulations authorize the board to use the information that is provided on the ARBO OE tracker system as proof of compliance. So we strongly encourage all licensees that have access to the ARBO OE tracker system to be using it, to be uploading course certificates, whether taken from ARBO COPE or from other organizations. That will go a long way to assisting both the licensee and staff in the audit process. Again, if we have access to the ARBO OE tracker system and see that all the requirements are met via that system, the audit is completed and the audit is passed. So please, licensees, if you're listening, use ARBO OE tracker. It will go a long way to making a audit process smooth for both the licensee and for board staff. We're going to continue to be providing outreach and information to licensees and applicants on this topic. As was mentioned earlier in today's meeting, the next newsletter, Spectacle, will feature some information on CE, both the requirements and the enforcement audit side of things as well. A reminder for new licensees that you are exempt for the first renewal period if you were licensed within 1 year of graduation. So what that means is if you are a licensee in that situation and you are now going to submit your renewal on Breeze, you should say yes, that you have met all of the requirements, because you are exempt, so you did meet the requirements. So a reminder to licensees that you are exempt for the first renewal period if you were licensed within 1 year. In this memo, we've also included the specific requirements for optometrists, depending on whether you are TPA certified or not. And you can find that information in item B of this memo. The final item for this memo, agenda item 8, is a discussion and possible action regarding CE courses and topics. As board staff has been reviewing the CE audit process, staff discovered that there are a few ARBO COPE accredited courses for which it is very difficult for staff to determine compliance with board requirements. As an example, some of these courses are pharmacology or PH designated, and they may be outside of the statutory requirements as they exist in Business and Professions Code Section 3059E. That is the section of law that requires some licensees to take CE courses in specific topics. There are other ARBO COPE courses that are in categories for which we, the board, lack criteria to determine how to apply the course for purposes of determining whether a licensee is compliant with the CE requirements. In doing all of this research, staff identified other boards and other jurisdictions that have created guides to address this issue. In your packet, we've included an example from the New Jersey State Board of Optometrists COPE category and code. It's linked. It's also included in your packet. And in that document, you can see that the New Jersey board is very clear and specific about which courses apply to which credit requirement. And so what staff would appreciate board direction on related to this item is possibly sending this specific item related to the COPE categories and courses and determining how and where they fit under our board requirements. Would appreciate sending that information to the Practice and Education Committee for them to explore in more depth at their next meeting. Happy to take any questions from members related to agenda item 8.
So you're really talking about more than one thing. And it is ideal to take it back to the Practice Education Committee, but we need to make it clear for them because there's so much work that they have to do, what we're asking for. So as an example, the coordination of ARBO related to the audit versus COPE related to identifying what subject matter it is. Those are two different topics, right? So we might need to prioritize what we want to work on first and what we want the PEC to work on first. That way there's clarity for the committee on what they're trying to achieve. Because I heard everything you said.
Sure, yeah.
And it was a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm not even sure what exactly our priorities would be so that we can make that motion forward. The ARBO OE tracker, there's multiple choices as far as how we can utilize that potentially for audits. One is the coordination between Breeze and their system, and that's the most lengthy process and the hardest one to do.
Yes.
It would take years probably. The second would be just using their system and creating reports for us to be able to use it for audit. But then there's the complication of not all optometrists are using and entering their non-COPE courses into the tracker. So, but these are really great questions I think that the PEC can flesh out and start coming up with a general idea and plan, but we need to kind of be clear with them what we're trying to achieve and what between the different opportunities is priority.
Member Kawaguchi, you're spot on. If I could perhaps try to give a little bit more information or clarity, I could endeavor to do so. One change that we've made at a staff level to be more efficient and effective in how we're performing our CE audits, which was a really simple change, was we are presently aware that many of our licensees, a majority of them in fact, do have an OE tracker number. As part of our CE audit process, every time an auditee was selected, we were sending them a letter asking them to tell us what their ARBO OE tracker number was, the very number that we already had access to in many respects. Again, not every licensee uses ARBO OE tracker or has an OE tracker number, but a majority of our licensees do have one. So that was a very simple change that we made. We're no longer sending letters to auditees asking them to provide us their OE tracker number. We're now on the front end going to OE tracker, looking up that licensee, and at that point, if we see enough, if the requirements are met based off what we see right there on ARBO OE tracker, the audit is passed and completed. In many cases, in fact, in most of the cases so far in the past few months, we don't see that, right? We might see 1 out of every 15 have enough information on ARBO OE tracker that enables us to pass and conclude the audit at that point. What most of our licensees do have is some information on their ARBO OE tracker. So we're able to use what we can see, and it's at that point that we'll follow up and ask for additional information, which might require them providing certificates and things of that sort. So that's a really simple, easy process change that we made already that is making our work more efficient and effective. As it relates to this COPE category issue, what I think staff would appreciate that committee helping us determine is coming up with a document like this that exists for the New Jersey board, where we affirmatively know, for example, that pharmacology is a TPA credit or not. Under our law, 3059, the word pharmacology never appears. So we don't have any objective criteria to determine whether pharmacology course is compliant with the 35 hours requirement that TPA licensees must hit. We do know that the pharmacology course counts toward the 50, but we don't know whether it counts one way or the other toward the 35. And so that's where a document like what exists for New Jersey would be very effective for both licensees and staff to affirmatively know this course counts for this credit requirement or it doesn't. So what I would be wanting as a motion today would be to send this document, this COPE document for New Jersey, to the Practice and Education Committee for them to consider developing a document like this. Now, I think this document would have to go through the regulatory process, so we'll have to deal with that aspect of it at a later time. But to help inform that regulatory process, I think it would be very helpful if the Practice and Education Committee could come up with a draft or something like this. I don't know if that helps further a little bit more information to the item. Okay. Mark.
I'm sorry, Mark, go ahead, please.
So on item 8B, the audit program, I get it, our board is a little behind the curve in doing audits, but I'm really saddened by the fact, I've known this, maybe I knew this before, that in the audits that we've been performing, the subjects, there's a high failure rate for the subjects, and that concerns me, and it saddens me because I'm wondering if the optometrists are not taking this board and their and the continuing education requirement seriously, and that explains the high failure rate. This is a subject we can discuss further in later meetings, but if this board is not being taken seriously regarding continuing education, then maybe we need to increase the fines and penalties for not complying with the CE audits. We've kind of been a bit lenient in our prior guidelines, but perhaps I hope we haven't been too lenient, and maybe this requires stronger penalties.
Member Mordomi, if I could just want to highlight that me citing the high failure rate was a reference to old data that was in regard to the sunset report. We're going to be bringing back at the May meeting and all future meetings new data. So I'm not trying to say right now at this moment that we currently have a high failure rate. We've only really just sort of begun in the last several months designing a more robust, if you will, CE audit program and really getting it up and running. And we're not reporting those new data at this meeting. So I think at the next meeting and all future meetings, we'll be reporting that data and be able to better sort of understand what the failure rate looks like today and then determine whether that's high or low. But the reference that I was making to a high failure rate was from the 2020 sunset report. It was in reference to that data.
Yeah, I remember working on that sunset report, so I'm not putting I'm not shooting the messenger. But my message was I hope that the association would take this board's concern about the failure rate back to its members and tell their members, listen, get up to date on your CE because the Board of Optometry is really concerned about it, and we're going to up the auditing program. And there's one crazy board member on the board that says, "Oh, gee, maybe penalties have to be increased too if the CE is not being taken seriously." That's all. Thank you, Greg.
Yeah, you're welcome. And just a reminder for everybody, February 25th, Saturday, I was at House of Delegates and stood up in front of several hundred of the folks in that room and told them exactly what I'm telling everybody today. The board is being active in its CE audit program. Don't be surprised if you are contacted because you've been selected for that. And again, an encouragement for folks to use the tools that already exist to help them and help us as we proceed in that work. So we are endeavoring to spread that message far and wide to let everybody know that we are being very active in the CE audit space. Yes. Well.
No other comments from board? So before we go to public comment, could I get a motion to send items A, B, and C, number 8, A, B, and C, to the PEC committee?
So just to be clear, I think what staff would be hopeful to receive today would be a motion related just to item C.
Okay.
To send
To create a list?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like what the words would be to say it. It'd be something like, to send the New Jersey COPE category document to the Practice and Education Committee to consider developing a similar document to pertain to our CE requirements. Something.
Greg, I'm wondering if you want something a little more broad, perhaps something closer to having the committee address, to research and report back to the board how the board can address how the ARBO COPE categories fit in with the board's CE requirements. Maybe not to the extent that it might not be a specific document, but a different mechanism to address the disconnect between the ARBO COPE categories and the CE requirements. Something closer to that? Yeah. Okay, then if anyone wants to make the motion, I guess we could attempt a motion to refer the Practice and Education Committee to research and report back to the full board on how the board can address how the ARBO COPE categories correspond to the board's CE requirements.
Member Kawaguchi so moves.
Member Sims, second.
Okay, I'm now going to open this up. Thank you. Let's go ahead and open this up to public comment. Is there public comment in the hearing room? And Madam Moderator, if you could open up the Q&A for public comment.
This is a moderator, and at the direction of the board, I've opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen or use the raise hand function. It looks like we do have a request for public comment from Christine Schultz. Christine, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Hi, this is Christine Schultz, Executive Director for the California Optometric Association. I first of all want to thank Greg for all of his hard work. He has done a fantastic job in keeping us updated and aware of what's going on. The changes at the board have been amazing. So first, I want to start with that, but then also wanted to, let you know that we will be letting the profession know about the failure rate and making sure that they complete their CE, remind them about the requirements and making sure that they are doing that. But my memory of the high failure rate wasn't because people were disregarding their CE requirements. It was for the vast majority of them were for technical violations. Like I remember one was that people thought that their CE was approved. It was advertised approved, but then it was denied. Then later, when the board finally took it up, it was not approved for CE, or it was off by a couple of days. So, want to make sure that we hear you, and we are going to make sure that people are aware and completing their CE, but also want to make sure that you are aware that it's not that people are just disregarding their CE requirements. The vast majority of providers take their CE seriously and complete it on time. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. It appears there are no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Okay, thank you. Well, now we are going on to item number 9, which is future agenda items. Roll call. Oh, I'm sorry. I was wondering if you could do a roll call vote, please.
Okay, so just to clarify, the motion is to direct the Practice and Education Committee to research and report back to the full board how the New Jersey COPE categories could correspond to our continuing education requirements. The motion was made by Dr. Kawaguchi, seconded by Member Sims.
Sorry to interrupt. In terms of the COPE categories, I would strike New Jersey from it. It's just ARBO COPE.
Okay, the ARBO COPE categories. Okay. Member Hancock? Oh, you might be muted. Member Hancock?
Is that better? Aye.
Yes. Great. Dr. Kawaguchi?
Aye.
Member Linden? Aye. Member Mordomi?
Aye.
Dr. Pruitt?
Aye.
Member Sims?
Aye.
Dr. Garcia?
Aye.
And Dr. Wong?
Aye.
Okay, 8 votes, the motion carries.
Thank you very much. We are now going to move on to item number 9, which is future agenda items. Does anyone on the board have any items that they would like to put on a future agenda? Any public comment? For public comment in the hearing room, does anyone have any items that they would like to add to future agendas? And we have someone here in the hearing room who would like to add.
Yeah, hello again, and I'm Steve Keller, license number OPT 10085. And I reluctantly am going to bring up this topic. And the reason that I'm doing it is because this topic that I'm going to bring up is the only thing in optometry that keeps me awake at night and has the potential to make me just quit. And that's what I'm going to call weaponized social media. I would define that as using social media to injure, discredit, or otherwise harm providers. I'd like to request that the board be aware and consider the extremely disruptive effect that weaponized social media is having on the provision of healthcare in California and the nation. Consumers, patients, are weaponizing social media. Optometric colleagues are weaponizing social media. The unwarranted and excessively unruly, disruptive, abusive, disagreeable, and confrontational behavior of consumers is markedly on the rise. And this behavior has a severely adverse effect on the provision of health care in this state. Therefore, may I request that the board consider and evaluate establishing a department or committee to receive complaints from optometrists reporting unruly or unethical behavior and or abusive use of social media perpetuated by patients or other optometrists. I just wanted to get that off my chest and on the record.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment in the hearing room? And Madam Moderator, if you could open up the Q&A for public comment, please.
This is the moderator, and at the direction of the board, I have opened up the Q&A feature for public comment. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment for future agenda items, please click the Q&A icon located at the bottom right-hand corner of your WebEx screen, or use the raise hand function. And audio-only participants can raise their hand by pressing *3 on their device. And it appears there are no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close that Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Okay, thank you. So we are now going to break for lunch. After lunch, we will be in closed session, so we will not be coming back. Right.
Lillian?
Yes.
So, in terms of timing, when are we going into closed session?
Yeah. How long do you guys want to break for lunch? You want like a half an hour? I know that I think our limiting factor is Glenn. He has a flight. So if you guys would all be okay with maybe a half an hour for lunch, and then so it's 1:15 right now. Maybe if we come back like at 1:45 for a closed session, and then we'll do closed session materials, and then after that we will reconvene in open session for adjournment. So we will have lunch, then closed session at 1:45, and which we'll do items number 10 and 11, and then after closed session, we need to reconvene back in open session in order to have adjournment. Does that work for everybody? All right, thank you. We have 30 minutes for lunch.
All right, this is the moderator. The time is 1:45 p.m., so I'm going to go ahead and move the board into the virtual room for closed session.
Okay, great. Thank you. So you guys are there now. It's so cold in here. I'm so cold. So are we back in open session?
Yes, we are.
Oh, okay, sorry. So I'd like to make a motion for adjournment. So we're just going to adjourn? Okay, so I'm now adjourning our meeting. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and we are done. Thank you.